If you're struggling with chunky glitter ombres, then this video is going to be for you. What's up, nail crew? It's Nicole, your fellow nail obsessed DIYer. Today we're going to talk all about how to dip chunky glitters and then ombre them. I'm going to use these two gorgeous colors. The yellow is called Ma Called, the bees are back. The glitter is I never know how to react when a grown man beatboxes in front of me. Sorry, I think that name is really funny. They are both from OG Dip Powder. And we're going to start off dipping the yellow solid first. I like to dip my solid colors and my shimmers first because I tend to be a really messy dipper, and if I don't do them first, then I often get glitter all contaminated in them, and I definitely don't want to do that. So I've realized for me it works best when I dip my solids and shimmers first, and then if any nails are going to be just the plain solid or the shimmer, I go through and I add clear on it and I activate it. So that's what I'm going to do first with this yellow, and it is super neon, which I'm absolutely loving. I've been really feeling the yellow colors this summer. I'm not sure why. Typically I go for like the really bright pinks, which obviously on the other hand you can see I have some pink on, but I've also really been loving the yellows this year. When I'm dipping my solid colors, I dip usually 2 dips of the color because I already have a layer of builder gel on my nails, so I don't need to build an apex, and my nails are pretty short. I really don't need an apex anyways. Now my middle nail, that's the one that I'm going to do the ombre on, and you'll notice on my second dip I do not apply the dip base and the powder all the way back. I leave a little space at the back because when you're using chunky glitters, or really any glitters, the glitter takes up a bit more room than just a solid color or a shimmer would. I like to leave some extra room at the back on the second dip. This way my nails aren't going to be super thick and chunky down by my cuticle. Then once I finish doing that second layer on each of them, I go and I applied the clear dip powder because I want to make sure that I have that clear dip powder over it and I activate it. I don't get any of the beautiful glitter contaminated into my solid nail. Next, we're going to do the nails that are going to have the chunky glitter, just the chunky glitter on them, not the ombre. I like to save my ombre nails for last. It feels like when I do that, then I have a little bit more control over my entire mani, and I'm able to really focus on the ombre or whatever design I'm doing, like if it's a color block or whatever. Sometimes I really like doing those last, and it works really well. So on your first dip of the chunky glitter, you don't want to pick up a ton of the chunky glitters. If you pick up a ton of the chunky glitters, then your nails are going to look thicker because the chunky glitters are thicker by nature. So I try not to pick up many of the chunky glitters on my first dip. I try to just pick up whatever the base is of the dip powder. It's like a silver glitter that's in this chunky glitter, and I try to just pick up that, and maybe if a few pieces of the chunky glitter come up on that first layer, then that's fine. Then I let it dry completely and really brush it off well before trying to go in for the second layer. And on the second layer, that's where I'm going to try to get as many of the chunky pieces as I can just by laying my nail flat into them. So I'm using these dip cups that I absolutely love. I'll make sure I link those in my description. Actually, I always link everything in my description just so everybody knows. I don't typically say that in the videos, but just so you all know, I link all this in the description so that if anybody is looking for any of the products, they can find them. So something that I always do when I'm using chunky glitters is I like to get a little bit of the chunky glitters and hand place them. And I'm using this flexible disc. It's also from the same company that the dip cup liners are from, SJ3 Designs. And I poured a little bit out onto this flexible disc thing. You're going to want to look at your nails and say, okay, where does it look like some chunky glitter pieces are missing? Where do I need to add some more? Then all you have to do after you dip that second layer is you just go in and hand place a few chunky glitters. The way I do that is not by putting base over my entire nail. I just drop a little bit of base in the sections where I feel like some of the chunky glitter is missing. I can use my Stabby stick that I use to trace around my cuticles. I can just use that to pick up some of the extra chunky glitters and place them around my nail where I feel like it was just missing some. And I try to use different colors. So, this dip right here, this chunky glitter dip, has a ton of colors. So I try to make sure that I am using a couple different ones when I'm placing them to really make all the different colors pop. Now, you don't have to do this if you don't want, but for me, I really love the way that it looks when you hand place some extra chunky glitters. Before we get to the ombre, if any of you are struggling with the basic dip application and you want to just start doing chunky glitters or different kind of manis and get your manis to last so you can start doing things like the fun ombres, I created this Dip Nails 101 guide that has everything I've learned over the past 4 years for you to successfully dip your nails at home. And I did not gatekeep anything. Everything that I could possibly think of is in this guide to help you do your nails, make them last, and give you all the knowledge that I wish I had when I first started dipping. I'm going to be keeping that in the description, and I'm going to make sure that it's the first pinned comment in the comments so everybody can always have access to it. Now we're going to get into the ombre, and this is the fun part, okay? We're going to go and apply the dip base over a majority of the nail, just not to the very, very tip. So you want to go from cuticle to almost the tip because you don't want anything getting on that tip of your nail since we're going to do the ombre. I like to use an ombre brush. I happen to all of my ombre brushes were dirty, so I use this little eyeshadow brush. I think it's either Wet n Wild or Elf, I can't remember, and they work pretty well. So you want to dip the brush into the glitter, point your nail downwards, and then lightly tap right around your cuticle so that it's pointing downwards, and that a majority of the dip is going to be towards your cuticle. You're going to get that ombre cascading effect. Now, since you're using chunky glitters, most likely what's going to happen is not many of the chunky glitters are going to be picked up when you're tapping like that, if any at all, especially if you're using those smaller brushes. It's because it's an eyeshadow brush. I just didn't have any of the bigger ombre brushes to use, so I had to use that little one. Then I can go through and I can hand place a bunch of glitters. And I hand place the big chunkies first, trying to make sure I get a couple different colors in there. Then I take some of the other little glitter pieces to make it look more of a cascading effect down my nail, and kind of put them throughout the chunky glitter pieces and then down more towards the tip of my nail, like it would be like a natural, gravitational fall down towards the tip of your nails. And that is how I get my chunky glitter ombres to look so nice and really give that beautiful cascading effect. Once you're totally happy with the placement of your chunky glitters and all the extra glitters that you wanted to add, that's when you're going to want to go and you're going to want to top with clear dip powder. Clear dip powder is always going to be your best friend when you're dipping with dip liquids. This is how you protect your colors, your glitters, your flakes, your foils, your shimmers. That is how you protect everything from when you file and buff and shape. I know everybody doesn't like to use clear dip powder when they do a solid nail or they do a shimmer nail, but for me, I use it as the last dip of every single nail that I do. I just love finishing the last dip with clear dip powder and making sure that everything's protected. Sometimes I tend to be a little heavy-handed when I file. Actually, not even with the hand file. I tend to be heavy-handed with the e-file, and I get a little too excited and typically e-file a little bit too much off. So I've noticed when I'm using clear dip powder, it really protects my colors, my glitters, my shimmers, everything from accidentally getting over-filed. Once you've finished with all of your clear dip powder application, make sure you brush it off really, really well. Some clear dip powders are crystal clear, like the one I'm using, but other ones are not as clear. So if you brush it off, you're gonna get all the excess clear off, so that then when you activate it, it's gonna be a lot more clear when you go to apply your top coat. The way that you make sure your dip hardens is by tapping on your nails. If you tap on your nails and it makes like this kind of hollow tapping sound versus no sound at all, and kind of feeling squishy, then you know that your activator has fully hardened the dip layers and you're ready to file and shape and buff. And if you need to, use an e-file to go around your cuticles or clean up anything that you missed around your cuticles. That's what I like to do. I personally am addicted to my e-file, so I pretty much always use it for every mani. I start with fixing up my shaping a little bit, making sure it's nice and crisp and it doesn't look too thick. Then I go in and buff and smooth anything out on the top of my nail that I need to, and that's where the clear comes in handy, because I'm not going to accidentally buff too much and go into my dip colors or my glitters, whatever I'm wearing. Then I like to go around my nails with an e-file. If you're not comfortable using an e-file, you can just go around with a flexible nail file. Wipe or spray your nails off with alcohol so that the top coating doesn't get messed up. If glitter ombres are too hard for you, check out this ombre with just 2 solid colors. Thanks for joining me today, nail crew.